What if the pressure in your chest after climbing one flight of stairs is not your age talking? It is your body screaming that something is missing. Here is what nobody tells you. Four of the greatest medical civilizations in human history, Egypt, India, China, the Arabian Peninsula, spent thousands of years documenting the exact plants that open arteries, soften vessel walls, and address the root mechanisms of arterial disease. Not as folk tales, as clinical observation replicated independently across continents, across centuries, across languages that had no contact with each other. And somewhere between the pharmaceutical revolution and your last doctor's appointment, all of it got quietly buried. Stick around, because plant number 4 on this list is sitting in your spice cabinet right now. You may have sprinkled it on your oatmeal this morning, and you had no idea it has been shown in clinical trials to reduce arterial calcification and directly protect the inner lining of your arteries. And plant number 6, preserved by Arabian physicians in the 9th century and almost completely erased from Western memory, has been shown in peer-reviewed research to reduce arterial stiffness through a mechanism that no pharmaceutical drug currently on the market can replicate. Hit subscribe before we start, because this channel exists for exactly this. Every week we bring back what was never supposed to be forgotten. Now let's get into it. Here are the 7 forgotten herbs that ancient healers used to unclog arteries, ranked from powerful to absolutely extraordinary. Quick note before we begin. Every plant and supplement I mention in this video is linked in the description below. I've done the research so you don't have to. Only standardized, clinically relevant forms. Everything is down there waiting for you. Plant number 1, garlic. The plant that 3 civilizations independently prescribed for the same thing, and modern cardiology finally caught up. The year is approximately 1270 BCE. A team of Egyptian scribes is copying medical knowledge onto papyrus in a format we now call the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents ever recovered from the ancient world. It contains over 870 prescriptions, among them clear instructions for using a pungent bulbed plant to treat what the scribes described as hardening of the heart vessels and sluggish blood. The Egyptians were not alone. Dioscorides, the Greek physician who traveled with the Roman legions in the 1st century CE, wrote that garlic cleansed the arteries and warmed the blood. On the other side of the world, the Karaka Samhita, the foundational Ayurvedic text, listed garlic as a ridya, a heart-benefiting herb used specifically for blockage of the channels that carry life force through the body. 3 civilizations, 3 continents, no communication with each other, the same plant, the same observation. That is not coincidence. That is pattern recognition accumulated over generations of people paying very close attention. Here is what they were actually observing and why it matters for the pressure you feel in your chest after climbing stairs. Your arteries are not pipes. They are living tubes lined with a delicate single layer of cells called the endothelium. When that lining is healthy, it produces nitric oxide, a signaling molecule that tells the arterial walls to relax, expand, and let blood flow freely. When that lining is damaged by inflammation, by oxidized fats, by years of the wrong inputs, it stops making enough nitric oxide. The walls stiffen. Deposits accumulate inside the tissue itself. Blood pressure rises. Your heart pushes against resistance that was not there a decade ago. Garlic contains a compound called allicin, formed the moment you crush a raw clove, and the enzyme alliinase reacts with alliin inside the broken cell walls. Allicin stimulates the production of hydrogen sulfide inside your endothelial cells. Hydrogen sulfide is one of the most potent natural vasodilators known to science. Think of it as a master key, one that tells the arterial wall to unlock, soften, and let blood through. At the same time, garlic inhibits platelet aggregation, gently discouraging the excessive clotting that narrows arteries that are already compromised. A landmark meta-analysis published in the Journal of Nutrition, reviewing 39 human clinical trials, found that garlic supplementation produced statistically significant reductions in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure in hypertensive patients. 39 trials. The ancient Egyptians were right. They just didn't have the language for allicin and hydrogen sulfide. They had something more reliable: observation. Here is how to use it. Crush 2 to 3 raw cloves and let them sit for 10 to 15 minutes before eating. That waiting period is not optional. It is the time the enzymatic reaction needs to fully form allicin. Heat destroys most of it. So if you are cooking, add garlic at the very last second or eat it raw if you can tolerate it. For supplements, look for aged garlic extract, standardized to at least 1.2 milligrams of S-allicystine at 600 to 1,000, 200 milligrams daily with food. One important caution: if you are on blood-thinning medications like warfarin, speak to your physician before using therapeutic doses. Garlic opens the vessel, but the second plant does something garlic cannot. It rebuilds the structure of the arterial wall itself. And its story begins not in Egypt, but in the mountain shrubberies of the Himalayas. Plant number 2, hawthorn. The thorned shrub with red berries that two completely separate medical traditions prescribed for the same heart condition 2,000 years apart. Around 600 BCE, the Ayurvedic physician Sushruta described a thorn-bearing shrub with brilliant red berries that he prescribed for Hridaya Roga diseases of the heart. He observed that patients who used preparations of this plant over months developed stronger, more regular heartbeats and reported less difficulty breathing during exertion. They could climb farther, carry more, live bigger. The European monastic tradition preserved it just as carefully. By the 16th century, the English herbalist John Gerard was writing that hawthorn berries prepared as a decoction were sovereign for the heart. Two traditions, 2 millennia of separation, the same berries, the same observation. Modern medicine got there eventually. It just took longer than it should have. Here is what hawthorn is actually doing and why garlic alone is not enough. When your arteries narrow and stiffen over time, a process begins that researchers call vascular remodeling. The smooth muscle cells in the arterial wall thicken. The collagen matrix that gives the vessel its flexibility, its ability to expand and contract with each heartbeat, begins to calcify and lose elasticity. The space inside the artery narrows. The heart, which now has to pump against stiffer resistance, compensates by working harder. This is not just a cholesterol problem. It is a structural problem. The architecture of the vessel itself is deteriorating. Hawthorn contains oligomeric proanthocyanidins OPCs, a class of antioxidants with a particular and documented affinity for connective tissue and the collagen matrix inside arterial walls. Think of them as the maintenance and repair crew for the scaffolding your arteries are built on. Its flavonoids, particularly vitexin, relax the smooth muscle in the coronary arteries directly, improving blood flow to the heart muscle itself. A double-blind clinical trial published in Phytomedicine involving 952 patients found that hawthorn extract produced significant improvements in exercise tolerance and reductions in both shortness of breath and fatigue compared to placebo over 16 weeks. 952 patients. Double-blind, peer-reviewed. Hawthorn was right there the whole time. Here is how to use it. Look for a standardized extract containing 1.8 to 2.2%. Vitexin 300 to 600 milligrams twice daily with food. Or simmer 1 tablespoon of dried berries in 2 cups of water for 20 minutes and drink 1 cup morning and evening. If you are on digoxin or any cardiac glycoside medication, speak with your physician before starting. Here is the most important thing to understand about hawthorn. It is a long-game plant. Its structural effects on the arterial wall take months, not days, to build. The ancient physicians who prescribed it understood something that modern medicine has largely forgotten: that true healing of the vascular system is measured in seasons, not prescriptions. Plant 3 comes from the Roman legions, a root that soldiers carried in their packs because they believed it kept their blood strong on long campaigns. Turns out they were right about the mechanism. They just didn't know why. Plant number 3. Ginger. The universal medicine, prescribed by 4 completely separate civilizations for the same cardiovascular mechanism. The Roman army physician Galen, writing in the 2nd century CE, described giving a root preparation to soldiers complaining of sluggish circulation in their legs during cold campaigns in northern Europe. Within weeks, he recorded, the men reported warmth returning to their extremities and less heaviness in their chests during marching. The ancient Chinese Shenong Bencao Jing listed ginger as a warming herb that opened the vessels and promoted the free movement of blood. Ayurvedic texts called it Vishwabheshaja, the universal medicine, specifically noting its value in sluggish circulation. And Avicenna, in his 11th century canon of medicine, described it as useful for breaking up stagnations in the blood. 4 traditions, 4 independent medical systems, 1 root, 1 observation. The blood moves better with this plant. Here is the specific mechanism they were observing without the language to describe it. One of the most dangerous events in arterial disease is not the plaque building up over decades. It is the moment a clot forms inside an already narrowed artery. Platelets, tiny cell fragments in your blood, receive a signal from a molecule called thromboxane to clump together. Inside a healthy, wide artery, occasional platelet aggregation is life-saving. Inside an artery already narrowed by years of inflammation and buildup, chronic platelet overactivation is a primary trigger for heart attacks and strokes. Ginger's compounds, gingerols and shogols, inhibit thromboxane. Think of it as turning down the volume on an alarm system that has been firing too loud for too long. At the same time, gingerols reduce inflammatory cytokines, the chemical messengers that drive the chronic arterial wall inflammation that researchers now understand as the central driver of atherosclerosis. A clinical study published in the Iranian Journal of Pharmaceutical Research found that 3 grams of ginger powder daily, over 45 days, produced significant reductions in triglycerides, LDL cholesterol, and total cholesterol compared to placebo. To use it, grate or slice a 1-inch piece of fresh root, steep in hot water for 10 minutes, 1 to 2 cups daily. For supplements, look for a standardized extract providing at least 5% gingerols at 1 to 3 grams per day. If you are on anticoagulant medications, consult your physician before therapeutic doses. 3 plants in: garlic opening the vessel, hawthorn rebuilding its architecture, ginger quieting the platelet storm and inflammatory signals. The next plant is the one that surprises people the most because you almost certainly already have it in your kitchen. And the cardiovascular story behind it is something almost nobody is talking about. Plant number 4, cinnamon, the spice you probably used this morning that has been shown in clinical trials to attack arterial disease through a mechanism that most cardiologists never discuss. Ancient China. The Sheneng Benkao Jing describes a tree bark called Ru Gui warming bark, prescribed for conditions involving what translates as sticky, heavy blood, and the metabolic dysfunction that drives it. Ancient Egypt cinnamon appears in medical papyri for heart-related conditions. Ayurveda called it tivak, a heart tonic and circulatory stimulant. 3 of the 4 great ancient medical systems. The same bark. The same cardiovascular application. Here is the conversation that is almost completely missing from mainstream discussions of arterial disease. The real driver for tens of millions of people is not cholesterol, it is insulin resistance. When your cells become resistant to insulin, as a substantial portion of people over 50 are often without any diagnosis, your pancreas compensates by producing more. Chronically elevated insulin tells the liver to produce more triglycerides and more of the small, dense LDL particles, most prone to oxidizing and penetrating the arterial wall. Simultaneously, high blood sugar damages the endothelium directly through a process called glycation, where sugar molecules attach to the proteins in the vessel wall, making it rigid and prone to microscopic cracking. That crack in the endothelium is where plaque formation begins. No one told you that the dessert-like sweetness in your blood was slowly fracturing the lining of your arteries from the inside. The ancient physicians noticed the downstream effects, the heavy blood, the poor circulation, the sluggish organ function. Modern biochemistry finally gave us the mechanism. Cinnamon, cinnamaldehyde, and polyphenols improve insulin sensitivity by activating GLUT4, the glucose transporter that pulls sugar out of the bloodstream and into cells. Think of insulin as the key, and GLUT4 as the door. Cinnamon helps open more doors, so less insulin is needed. Triglycerides drop, oxidative stress on the arterial wall decreases, and the chemical environment inside the vessel becomes significantly less hostile. A meta-analysis published in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics reviewing 10 clinical trials, found that cinnamon supplementation produced significant reductions in fasting blood glucose, total cholesterol, LDL, and triglycerides. Critical distinction, and this matters more than almost anything else in this video. The cinnamon in most grocery stores is cassia, high in coumarin, which accumulates in the liver and can cause damage in consistent therapeutic doses. You want Ceylon cinnamon cinnamomum verum very low in coumarin, and the variety actually used in clinical research. Half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon in warm water, tea, or oatmeal daily. For supplements, 1 to 3 grams of Ceylon cinnamon equivalent per day. If you are diabetic and on blood sugar medication, monitor your levels carefully. It works. 4 plants in. And if you have made it this far, you already understand something most people never get told, that arterial disease is not one problem. It is 5 or 6 simultaneous mechanisms operating in parallel, and every plant on this list targets a different one. If this is the kind of knowledge you have been looking for, subscribe right now and ring the bell. The next 3 plants, including the one from a 9th century Arabian physician that stunned me when I first read the research, are where this list goes from powerful to extraordinary. Plant number 5. Black seed. The plant found in a pharaoh's tomb, preserved by Islamic physicians for 1,000 years. And now one of the most rigorously studied anti-inflammatory compounds in cardiovascular research. Baghdad. 9th century CE. The golden age of Islamic medicine. In the great library hospitals of the Abbasid Caliphate, physicians were translating Greek, Persian, and Indian medical texts and running what we would now recognize as systematic clinical observation. Among the plants they documented was one called Habatus sauda, the seed of blessing. It was small, black, slightly bitter, known today as black seed, Nigella sativa. It had already been in use for 3,000 years before they wrote about it. It was found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, placed there 3,300 years ago. The Romans used it. Indian Ayurveda used it for inflammatory conditions. Ancient Chinese texts referenced it. This plant appears independently across every great medical civilization that ever encountered it. Here is what chronic inflammation actually does inside your arterial wall, and why thymoquinone, black seed's primary active compound, is getting serious attention from cardiovascular researchers. When the arterial wall is inflamed by oxidized LDL, by metabolic stress, by the chemical environment of insulin resistance, it recruits immune cells called macrophages. Those macrophages engulf the oxidized cholesterol. They transform into what researchers call foam cells. Foam cells accumulate in the arterial wall. They die there. They calcify. The plaque grows. The artery narrows. This is atherosclerosis at the cellular level, and it is driven, fundamentally, by a chronic inflammatory signal. That signal is controlled primarily by a protein called NF-κB, the master switch of inflammatory gene expression. When NF-κB is activated, it turns on dozens of pro-inflammatory genes simultaneously. Thymoquinone directly inhibits NF-κB. Think of it as walking into the command center of your body's inflammatory response and ordering a stand down. A randomized controlled trial published in Phytotherapy Research found that Nigella sativa supplementation over 8 weeks produced significant reductions in total cholesterol, LDL, and triglycerides alongside a significant increase in HDL compared to placebo. To use it, 1 teaspoon of cold-pressed black seed oil daily, taken straight and followed by a little raw honey, or mixed into a smoothie. For capsules, 500 milligrams to 1 gram of black seed oil per day. If you are on antihypertensive medications, monitor your blood pressure. It genuinely moves numbers. Plant 6 is the one that surprised me most when I first encountered the research. It comes from a tradition that most Westerners know almost nothing about, and its mechanism on the arterial wall through the liver is unlike anything else on this list. Plant number 6, Guduchi, the climbing vine that Ayurvedic physicians called the nectar of immortality, and that modern research shows targets a cholesterol-clearing mechanism more expensive than most drugs. It grows as a climbing vine in the forests of South Asia. In Sanskrit, it carries the name Guduchi. In the Ayurvedic system, its designation is Amrita, the nectar of immortality. Modern science calls it Tinospora cordifolia. It has been used continuously in Indian medicine for over 3,000 years, prescribed for what Ayurvedic physicians described as vitiation of the blood that had become thick, sticky, and laden with what they understood as accumulated metabolic toxins. Here is the mechanism that almost nobody in mainstream medicine discusses, and that makes this plant different from everything else on this list. Your liver is the organ most responsible for cholesterol regulation. It synthesizes cholesterol, packages it into lipoproteins, and critically clears LDL from your blood through surface receptors. When the liver is overburdened by decades of metabolic stress, its ability to pull LDL out of circulation is impaired. It also produces a protein called PCSK9, which destroys those very LDL receptors, further reducing the liver's ability to clear LDL. This is actually the target of the most expensive new class of cholesterol drugs. PCSK9 inhibitor injections cost between $5,000 and $7,000 per year. They work by blocking exactly this mechanism. Tinospora cordifolia has been shown in research to regulate PCSK9 expression and enhance the liver's LDL receptor activity through the same pathway. A study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology documented significant lipid-lowering effects alongside improvements in liver enzyme markers, meaning the plant was not just reducing cholesterol in the blood, it was restoring the organ responsible for managing it at the source. Ancient Ayurvedic physicians had no concept of PCSK9. They had something better. They watched patients for generations, and they documented that this vine, taken consistently over months, cleaned the blood in ways other plants did not. To use its standardized Guduchi extract at 300 to 500 milligrams twice daily with meals. The powder can be simmered 1 teaspoon per 2 cups of water for 15 minutes and drunk as a tea. People with autoimmune conditions should use it with caution due to its immunomodulating properties and discuss with their physician. The seventh and final plant has the oldest documented cardiovascular use in all of human history. Its story begins not in India or Egypt, but on clay tablets from Mesopotamia 40 centuries ago. Plant number 7. Turmeric. 4,000 years of documentation, and the most complete cardiovascular mechanism of anything on this list. More than 4,000 years ago, clay tablets from Sumerian and Babylonian civilizations described a bright yellow spice used for conditions of the blood and the liver. In ancient India, it was called Haridra, the golden one, and the Charaka Samhita described it as an agent that cleaned the channels of the body. In China, it was Jiang Huang, prescribed for blood stagnation and poor circulation. Avicenna included it in his canon of medicine for liver and blood conditions. 4,000 years. 4 major civilizations. 1 consistent observation. This plant keeps the blood and the vessels clean. Here is why. Turmeric's primary compound curcumin does not do one thing. It operates on multiple vascular pathways at the same time, which is why ancient physicians kept reaching for it when others failed. It inhibits NF-κB, the same master inflammatory switch as thymoquinone, but through a partially different molecular pathway. That means combined with black seed, their anti-inflammatory effects are additive. It upregulates NRF2, the master antioxidant pathway, triggering your body's own production of glutathione and other protective compounds. And it reduces adhesion molecules on the endothelial surface, the molecules that allow inflammatory cells to stick to the vessel wall and start the plaque cascade in the first place. A clinical study published in Nutrition Research found that curcumin supplementation significantly improved endothelial function and arterial compliance in postmenopausal women to a degree comparable to a regular exercise program. To a degree comparable to exercise, a root growing in the earth for 4,000 years. Now here is the most important practical note in this entire video. Curcumin has very poor bioavailability on its own. Your gut absorbs very little of it before it is broken down. And here is the remarkable part. Ancient Ayurvedic preparations always combined turmeric with black pepper and fat. Always. Modern research finally explains why. Piperine, the active compound in black pepper, inhibits the liver enzymes that metabolize curcumin before it can be absorbed, increasing bioavailability by up to 2,000%. Without the black pepper, you are using a fraction of turmeric's potential. Ancient healers figured out the delivery mechanism thousands of years before pharmacokinetics existed as a field. Golden paste, 1 teaspoon of turmeric, a firm pinch of freshly ground black pepper, a teaspoon of coconut or olive oil, stirred into warm water, once daily. For supplements, look for curcumin with enhanced delivery systems, BCM, 9,5, Mariva, or Theracurmin at 500 to 1,000 milligrams per day. Start low and build gradually. If you are on blood thinners, consult your physician. 7 plants, 7,000 years of cumulative human observation. Now, the part that turns this list into something you can actually do starting tomorrow morning. The goal here is not to overwhelm your body or your routine. It is to build systematically, layer by layer, so each plant is doing its specific work before the next one is added. Week 1. Garlic and turmeric. Garlic in the morning, 2 crushed cloves with breakfast, rested for 10 minutes first, or your aged garlic extract supplement. Turmeric in the evening, golden paste in warm water, or your curcumin supplement with dinner. These two together address the nitric oxide deficit in your endothelium and the master inflammatory pathways simultaneously. You are working at the root level from day 1. Most people feel nothing the first week. That is correct. These are not pharmaceuticals forcing a chemical shift. These are nutrients, restoring a function that has been deficient for years. Week 2. Add ginger in the morning. A cup of fresh ginger tea with breakfast. Ginger joins garlic in the morning because both address platelet aggregation and inflammatory prostaglandins, and their effects are additive. Week 3. Add hawthorn, morning and evening. This is your long game plant. Its structural effects on the collagen matrix of the arterial wall take months to build. Starting it in week 3 means that by month 3, it is doing work that nothing else on this list can replicate. Week 4, add black seed oil with your evening meal. With turmeric already running in the evening, you now have 2 distinct NF-κB suppression pathways operating simultaneously through complementary mechanisms. This is not redundancy. This is synergy. Weeks 5 and 6, add Ceylon cinnamon in the morning and begin Guduchi in the evening. Cinnamon addresses the insulin-driven vascular damage at its metabolic source. Guduchi restores the liver's capacity to clear LDL, the upstream origin of the problem for many people. What to track and when in the first 4 weeks? The most commonly reported early changes are improved circulation, warmth in the extremities, and slightly more consistent energy. By months 2 and 3, if you are monitoring cholesterol and triglycerides, you may begin to see movement in your numbers. Hawthorn's structural arterial effects require a minimum of 3 consistent months. You are not taking these plants instead of working with your physician. You are restoring something your body was always supposed to receive. The body has a remarkable capacity to repair, but it needs the raw materials. These 7 plants are raw materials your ancestors consumed by default. You simply have to be more deliberate about getting them back. I want to speak directly to you for a moment, not about biochemistry, not about clinical trials, but about what you are actually carrying. You have been told that the pressure in your chest, the numbers on your lab panel, the vessels, your heart depends on that. All of it is just age, just genetics, just the cost of living in the modern world. You have been handed a prescription and told that this is management, not healing. But your body is not failing. Your body is signaling. It is telling you, in the only language it has, that something it needs has been absent. The ancient physicians of Alexandria and Baghdad, the Vaidyas of ancient India, the scholars of the Han dynasty, they understood something fundamental that modern medicine has largely forgotten, that the body does not simply deteriorate, it responds, it adapts. And when given what it genuinely needs, it repairs. Those healers did not have imaging machines or lab panels. What they had was time, generations of observation, the patience to watch what happened when they gave a patient this plant over months, over years, across entire lifetimes. The same plants appearing in the Ebers Papyrus and the Karaka Samhita and the Canon of Medicine were not coincidences. They were findings. Replicated findings accumulated by the greatest long-term clinical study in human history. 4,000 years of human beings paying very close attention to what healed them. Modern medicine stopped listening to that study for about a century. It has slowly begun again, through researchers running controlled trials on compounds that ancient physicians described long before the scientific method existed. This channel exists because that knowledge deserves to be remembered, not as folklore, as the oldest, most thoroughly observed tradition of healing that has ever existed. You are not without options. You have never been without options. The options were always there, growing in the earth, documented in the texts, waiting to be remembered. If this video gave you something, one plant you are going to try, one mechanism that finally explains something you have been feeling, leave a like, subscribe if you have not yet, ring the bell, and in the comments below, tell me which of these 7 plants surprised you the most, or tell me what brought you here today. I read every single comment. The healing was never lost. It was only forgotten.